Okay. Apparently we're live now. Okay. So we'll start us off. So excited that you decided to spend your May Day evening with us. A happy International Workers' Day. I just want to start off by acknowledging that I am on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish people. And today we have people calling in from all across the unceded territories of Turtle Island. This event, May Day in a Pandemic, Frontline Workers versus the Ruling Class, is being hosted by the Vancouver May Day Collective. We're a group of organizers from different sectors that have come together to make sure there's a cool event on May Day every year. So prior to the pandemic, Indigenous groups all across Canada were taking actions as part of Shutdown Canada in solidarity with the Wet'suwet'en struggle for recognition of land title and against the Coastal GasLink pipeline. It's hard to reconcile that only a few months ago, this movement was receiving blowback for causing undue economic harm. The pandemic that we're in right now demonstrates that the safety and well-being of people can be protected at the cost of the economy. But it also shows the crude realities of inequality in our society within Canada and globally in terms of whose well-being is prioritized. Indigenous struggles against capitalism and colonialism are interlinked with the struggles and collective action of the frontline workers that we will hear about today on the panel. These workers are also calling attention to and pushing back against the dysfunctions and inequalities that have been created by a system that prioritizes the ruling elite and the pursuit of profit over all else. We also wanted to start with a shout out to the workers at Amazon, Whole Foods, Instacart, and Target, who are striking today in a historic strike and asking customers to stage a one-day solidarity boycott in support of their struggles at this time because of COVID-19. We will hear from each of our speakers and then there'll be some time for questions. Please post your questions on the live feed. First, we'll hear from Deena Ladd at the Workers' Action Center. Then we'll hear from Sarah Dowd, who's joining us from the New York State Nurses Association. Then we'll hear from two workers from Fuerza Migrante. And then we will hear from Ivan Ostos, who's a food courier at the Foodsters United campaign. So now I will turn it over to our first speaker, Deena Ladd. Deena Ladd has been working to improve the wages and working conditions in sectors dominated with low wages, violations of rights, and precarious work for the past 27 years. Deena is active in the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, 15 and Fairness, and is one of the founders and ED of the Toronto's Workers' Action Center. The Workers' Action Center organizes to improve wages and working conditions with workers, women, and immigrant workers in precarious jobs that face discrimination, violations of rights, and no benefits in the workplace. So Deena, I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to speak. And I want to wish everyone a sort of a courageous and happy International Workers' Day. It's hard to say happy in this moment, just because of what's been happening. But I do think it's an incredibly important day to reflect on, obviously, our collective experience in terms of what's been happening and what does this mean for all of the work that we're doing in all the different kind of sectors that we're organizing in. I do want to acknowledge, though, at the outset, what an incredibly difficult time it's been for all of us, whether those of us who have lost our jobs, lost a loved one, been forced deeper into poverty or sickness, the stress of being an essential worker and, putting health and your own life on the line every day. And for those of us who have been organizing mutual aid and organizing for social justice, it's been a really, really rough few months. So I think that it's important to just kind of acknowledge that. was hearing Arundhati Roy speak the other day. She's a writer from India, and she's sort of one of my heroes. And I love what her sort of analysis. And she talked about COVID-19, like this virus acting like an X-ray on society, and that it is exposed and expanded and amplified the great injustices that exist in our communities. And I think that that is just really kind of resonated with me, because we've seen the impact of and the brutality of decades of neglect and horrendous working conditions magnified in the last 7 weeks in many of the low wage sectors that I organize in with the Workers Action Center, such as cleaning, long-term care, grocery store work, retail, food processing, care work, service and retail, warehouse, all these low wage sectors, and what's been happening to workers. And of course, for many of us, as we've watched this unfold, it's not been a surprise, as we know the conditions in meat processing factories and what migrant workers with no status have to go through, with threat of deportation hanging over their heads if they say anything, or the work of many racialized and immigrant women as personal support workers, or the fact that, even before this pandemic, the work that we were doing with the Latinx community in Toronto, with mainly women cleaners, there was no personal protective equipment, and there certainly hasn't been since this COVID-19 outbreak, and that continues today. And so those conditions continue to exist. And so for us at the Workers Center, back in January, it feels like a lifetime ago, in Toronto, the Chinese community was hit incredibly hard with, when we called it the coronavirus. Many of the workers in that community are paid cash, work below minimum wage, and experienced a massive job loss on a huge scale. The entire Chinatowns, we have like several in the Greater Toronto area, were completely closed down. People lost their work. There was the stigma of the virus, the absolute racism that was being targeted towards the Chinese community. There was no access to employment insurance. There was no government response. People had no paid sick days. And so when we were organizing around this back in January and February, just seeing the response and knowing who was in charge and knowing who was making decisions at that moment, we were sort of banging our heads against the brick wall. And then, of course, once the pandemic hit, things just got worse. And so the X-ray has, the COVID-19 being an X-ray, has exposed the absolute lack of labor rights, the housing crisis, the shelter crisis, lack of healthcare for all, the worsening of horrendous conditions, like basically accessing water and basic necessities for Indigenous communities, and the appalling racist immigration regulations that deny basic fundamental human rights to essential workers that have been coming into this country every day. So there really is this double standard, right? A total double standard of who is allowed to take care of themselves, who's allowed to socially distance, who's allowed to stay at home and take care of themselves, who's allowed to stand 8 meters or 2 meters apart at the grocery store. And then those who have to take crowded buses to jobs and get intimidated at work if they speak up about the health and safety conditions. So as we grapple with these day-to-day realities in our organizing, we're also trying to figure out what the hell does this mean for the working class, for our movement for social justice, and for our communities suffering right now. And I, by any stretch of the imagination, am not claiming to have any answers for the way forward, but I do have some thoughts. I have some thoughts in terms of what does this mean for our collective organizing, and how do we build power so that we can come out of this stronger. And so I think, essentially, I think the first thing that I'd like to sort of put out there as we think about how we move forward in our organizing is that we cannot divide the migrant worker justice movement from the labor movement. We cannot. The two are intricately linked. And we're seeing this now more than ever before. You know, there are potentially 2 million migrant workers in Canada who don't have any permanent residence in this country. And many of them are in the middle of basically an invisible crisis because they don't have any access to any of the supports that are there. And so we've been also faced with the contradictions, right? First, the government, Trudeau said, we're going to close the borders. But then it was like, oh shit, you know, we need those farm workers, we need those care workers, we need those workers to come in and do the jobs that we need everybody to do. And so they were completely caught up in their contradiction. And then they had to open the borders, and then they had to allow people to come through. And so, you know, it's no surprise that as, you know, in many of the workplaces that I'm seeing is that, you know, as citizens decide to stay home, you know, and these are low wage workers too, but they have citizenship. As they decide to stay home, who are the people working at the Tim Hortons? Who are the people working in the factories? It's international students. We've seen restrictions lift in terms of the hours of work that they're allowed to work now. And so just look at who is in those workplaces right now and who's working and who's staying home, and or who has some semblance of some protection to stay home. And so I think that fundamentally, as we move forward, the two have to move in tandem and work together. And so if we are a labor organizer, we cannot do our organizing without ensuring that we are connected and working in tandem with the migrant worker justice movement. The second point that I'd like to make is that, you know, building a strong labor sort of agenda that brings union and non-union workers together and raising the floor from the bottom is absolutely the way forward to move in building a strong labor movement. We've seen this in Ontario with the 15 and Fairness agenda, which had a joint union, non-union agenda that brought people together and was really about just raising the floor. And I think that that fundamentally is quite important, because we are going to be entering, we are already in a system where collective agreements are going to be gutted. Employers are already demanding massive concessions in bargaining, and many union workers are struggling to get essential job protections such as paid sick days, equal pay for equal work, and that's even in the public sector. And so I think fundamentally, if we're ever going to actually raise the bottom up and to ensure that that happens, the two have to be absolutely linked. And I think, again, this crisis has seen that, you know, you've got non-union grocery store workers basically dealing with the same issues as union grocery store workers, except the unionized got plexiglass in front of them, right? But that took a while in it coming. And so I think the sort of lack of power in these sectors show how important it is to sort of build and knit the two together. I think the third point I want to make is that we've had collective political education of the public on essential work on a scale that we've never seen before. When was the last time you heard cleaners and grocery store workers being called superheroes, right? There is this massive understanding of these essential jobs and what it now means for many people to get their groceries. Things that people just took for granted before, right? Because it just happened, right? You went, the stores were open whenever you wanted it, and then you just got what you needed. But essentially what's happened in the last sort of 2 months has been this raising of public consciousness about who does these jobs? What do they have to go through? We've had more media articles, more sort of public exposure than we've ever had before. We need to capitalize on this. We need to ensure that that collective experience of this virus, that this collective experience of some of us being forced home, but then appreciating banging on our pots and pans at 7:30, like I was just out this tonight with my neighbors who I've never really done that before, and who wouldn't necessarily see themselves doing that before. How do we use that momentum, that political consciousness, to ensure that those people be involved in our movement building for decent wages and working conditions? That the pandemic pay is not temporary, that the free childcare now being offered to grocery store workers and truck drivers to get them to come to work is not a temporary measure, but it becomes part of what our expectations should be of a decent job and of decent working conditions. And how do we get all of those people involved in our movement as in that rallying cry for the changes that need to be taken in order to make our society better? And so if that means, moving them into pushing for improvements and to get status for farm workers, or to ensure that the minimum wage is $20 an hour, and that we get free childcare, like these are the things that we now need to start to move the dial up. I've got two more points. The fourth point is that austerity is going to come at us hard. And we're already seeing signs of the right wing basically starting to say, oh, after, June, we should cut those working people off the emergency benefits. The slaggards, they just want to stay at home, for $2,000 a month. They don't want to work. They don't want to go back to work. We cannot provide any incentives for people to stay at home. We're starting to see businesses lobby at the federal level to reduce labor standards as people start to return to work. We are going to see, as I said, a lot of, the government is going to say, we need to make sacrifices to get the economy going. We've got to support our local businesses. We've got to give the boss a break. So we're going to be starting to say, we have no money for public services. We spent it all during COVID-19. There's nothing left. We have a huge deficit. We all have to sacrifice together. So that is kind of starting to unravel right now. And I think that we need to be very clear, and we need to be very strong at this moment to show exactly how the wage subsidies and the money that the employers have gotten, and how it differs to what workers have had to fight for. And the fact that so many workers haven't been able to get the emergency response benefit because they don't have a valid social insurance number, or because they have been, they're not recognized as workers in the labor market. And so this is our moment to also really make it clear, crystal clear, the impact, the differential impact of the government response. The last point I'll make is that, we're all being told we're all in this together. No, we're not. We're not in this together. There's a very clear difference of who has been on the front lines of having to put their health at risk, and who hasn't. And I think that we need to recognize the fact that it has been mainly people of color and racialized workers and immigrants, international students, workers coming in through the migrant worker programs that have been forced to do the jobs that nobody wants to do because they're trying to socially distance. Absolutely, there are many low-wage Canadian workers that have also been in that same situation. So we are in this moment where we have to build those solidarities. We have to ensure that that link is made, that solidarity is made, but that we also ensure that the courage, the bravery, the strength of essential workers and who they are, and that leadership is reflected in our movements, and that it is part and parcel of how we build a stronger labor movement coming out of this, because we certainly have seen the incredible leadership and strength and bravery of essential workers, and having that move us out of this crisis and showing that leadership and supporting that leadership and centralizing that leadership in our movement is going to be critical in terms of also galvanizing public support and inspiring the rest of us to get our shit together and to organize around them. So I'm going to leave it at that. But those are just some thoughts as I end my presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Deena, for setting the stage for us. That was excellent. Next, we will hear from Sarah Dowd, who's a registered nurse at Harlem Hospital. She's a shop steward of the New York State Nurses Association, and she is also the chair of the New York City Democratic Socialists of America Labor Branch. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us from the heart of the COVID crisis in North America.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thank you for having me. Deena, I really appreciated the points you said, particularly about building solidarity. Before I start into my original thing that I was going to talk about, we did have an action today outside of one of the Amazon warehouses, and it was great. It was Amazon workers, it was Google workers, it was healthcare workers, and I think and transit workers. And I think that's kind of like what you're referencing of the kind of thing that we need to build is cross-sector solidarity. So like Sarah said, my name is Sarah Dowd. I work at Harlem Hospital in Manhattan. I was just gonna kind of give an overview of what we did and kind of some of my thoughts reflecting on it. We started off with really obviously horrendous conditions. Even at baseline, we're short-staffed. We struggle with getting equipment. And when COVID hit, it was just all of those problems on overdrive. It's an inner city public hospital that's part of the public hospital system in New York, which is the largest public hospital system in the country. And it's just been chronically underfunded. We primarily serve, really the very poor of New York, people that are homeless, people that cannot reimburse us in any way, people that are undocumented. And of course, it's not really a surprise to probably anybody that it's an underfunded system that's, dealing with this. So when COVID hit, we, had a critical shortage of PPE, particularly the N95 respirators that protect from airborne pathogens. We also had a shortage of other equipment, like things that the machines we would use to monitor the oxygen saturation in the blood, which is usually a strong indicator of whether or not a patient will need to be intubated. Other things, we were missing stretchers, and vital signs machines, just things that we needed to monitor the patients. And these were conditions that were pretty widespread throughout the city. The public sector was obviously hit hard. The private sector was also had a shortage of PPE, less so of equipment, I think. And there were a series of actions that nurses organized. The first one being at Jacoby Medical Center, another public sector hospital. And we had four of them all together. And after the series of actions we had, we found the next week that Governor Cuomo did issue a new edict saying that every frontline worker that needs a new N95 would get one every day, which was a huge improvement over the policy we had before, which was one N95 for 5 shifts, which is about 60 hours of work. No real evidence that these masks are effective to that point. So it was a victory for us. We obviously had other things that we had demanded that we did not get. But as we all know, the road is long and full of many fights. So the model that we used to organize these actions was really on the fly and relied heavily on a lot of our previous organizing that we had done around other workplace issues and contract fights. We had been organizing for years, not just at our jobs, but within our unions. And by we, I mean myself and other nurses that work throughout the city that we know each other through the union and have been organizing for a long time, both at work, a lot of times actually already around occupational health and safety issues, and also organizing within the union, trying to make it as militant and democratic as possible. And our previous organizing laid the groundwork for the organizing that we did in response to COVID. We turned basically our contract action teams into COVID action teams. And we're still using those, even though the conditions have gotten a little bit better. Hospitalizations have decreased, but we're still kind of using these structures to build organization at our hospitals and between hospitals. And there was a lot of more people that participated in these actions than we had seen before, particularly at my hospital, Harlem Hospital. And the difference, I think, between then and now about what is making these actions successful is that workers were ready to take action. And we're not just seeing that with unionized workers, but we're seeing that with non-union workers, like at Amazon, the Pilgrims Pride Wildcat strike. And it's been inspiring. And I think we're definitely in a labor organizing moment that we should definitely do as much with it as we can. And for me, just reflecting on what we've done and what we need to do next, I think that one of our major challenges will be to transition the energy generated in these fights towards larger demands. So like Deena was saying, we're looking at an austerity budget here in New York City under Cuomo. He cut Medicaid, he cut the budget to the public hospital system. And like I said, these are systems that a lot of poor and marginalized communities rely on, and cutting them in the midst of a public health crisis is a death sentence for New Yorkers. And there's already a body of evidence emerging in New York that people of color are suffering worse outcomes as a result of COVID-19. And Cuomo's out here saying, like, we need further research about why these health disparities exist. Meanwhile, I'm going to cut funding to the health services that a lot of marginalized communities rely on. And it's just really shameful and blind. And so I think fighting against that is going to be one of our major fights. And in my ideal situation, we're not necessarily preoccupied with defensive fights, but we're actually going on the offensive, where we're saying, hey, like, we're going to go on strike until every hospital in New York City is a public hospital. And I think in the intermediate of my vision, that's my ideal. But we obviously have a lot of work to do before we're ready to wage that fight. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that contribution. I'm happy both of you have also included some hope, which is really nice about, this is really making people more ready to act than we've seen before. So next, we will hear from Fuerza Migrante. Fuerza Migrante is a migrant justice organization based in Vancouver, BC. They organize mostly with migrant farm workers. And they'll explain more about who they are and the work they do now.
Hi. Thanks. Thank you, everyone. I'm here with Carlos. Noe and Alejandro are going to be presenting too. But because Carlos and I are together, I'm going to help translating for him and for Noe. And then I will finish with some notes. Okay, thanks. I'm sorry, and yeah, so Carlos and Noe are going to be speaking in Spanish, and I'll help with translation into English.
Mi nombre es Carlos Jiménez, soy de Guatemala. Vine a Canadá como trabajador agrícola por 5 años. hasta el año 2018. Ahora estoy en otro programa. Esenciales. Según el diccionario, son aquellas personas importantes, de tal manera que no se puede prescindir de ellos. Como trabajadores agrícolas, no queremos ser esenciales solo en tiempos de crisis. Queremos que sepan que siempre hemos sido esenciales, pero siempre nos han escondido detrás de los arbustos de las granjas. Hoy más que nunca, queremos que todos se den cuenta de la importancia que tenemos para que usted tenga sus alimentos día a día.
So my name is Carlos Jimenez. I'm from Guatemala. I came to Canada as an agricultural worker for 6 years until 2018. Now I'm here under another temporary foreign worker program. Essential, according to the dictionary, are those important people in a way that society cannot prescind from them. As agricultural workers, we don't want to be essential only in times of crisis. We want you to know that we have always been essential, but we have always been hidden behind the bushes of the farms. Today, more than ever, we want everyone to realize the important role we play for you to have food every day.
Si somos esenciales, ¿por qué nunca nos han dado el derecho a recibir un salario justo? Ni mucho menos a tener el derecho a que nos paguen overtime. Considero que desde hace mucho nos hemos ganado ese derecho y se nos ha negado. Se dice que por esta crisis nos tienen aislados. Lastimosamente tengo que hablar con la verdad. Desde hace mucho nos tienen aislados. Y no solo en este tiempo de crisis. No me alcanzaría la noche para poder explicarlo. Algo real es que aún siendo de países extranjeros, hemos aportado tanto a este país y los engrandecidos son otros, ya que nuestros nombres no aparecen en el libro de la historia de las granjas.
If we are essential, why have we never been given the right to a fair wage? Much less have we had the right to get paid overtime. I think it has been long since we earned those rights and being denied them. They say that due to this crisis, they have to isolate us. Unfortunately, I have to tell the truth. They have isolated us for a long time, and this is not only in times of crisis. The night wouldn't be long enough to explain it. Something true is that even though we are foreign workers, we have contributed a lot to this country, but those praised are others, while our names will not appear in the farm history book.
Thank you, Carlos, for getting our contribution started, and thank you to everyone here for being patient with us as we translate. We actually, like Alexandra said, we're going to continue to do that throughout what we share. So my name is Alejandro, and as Sarah said, we are Fuerza Migrante. We're a grassroots organization based in what is mistakenly known as the Lower Mainland, whose objective is to participate, but also enhance collective power and processes of mutual aid within migrant farm working communities. And we do this work, like I'm sure many of you folks, through direct outreach with farm workers, meeting them exactly where they are in their farms and wherever they hang out, wherever they have to go do their groceries, although that's been a little bit changing now. And we will talk about the challenges that we've had in our organizing model through that. And the idea for us is basically to politicize their daily troubles and concerns, making all of us understand how the individual troubles that we have are part of a larger movement, which has been something that the previous speakers have been touching upon. So it is through this work, this direct experience with migrant farm workers and migrant farm workers themselves and their experiences that we want to share some things with you today. So our next contributor will be Noé, who will speak on the migrant farm worker conditions around the COVID, the response of some government officials and governments more generally, and finally, the position of our organization in the face of this crisis.
Hola, mi nombre es Noé. Soy de Hidalgo, México. Fui trabajador agrícola por 4 años, como Carlos, pero ahora estoy en otro programa de trabajadores temporales. Este año los trabajadores agrícolas están pasando por algo mucho más complicado que otros años debido a la contingencia sanitaria, debido al COVID-19. Tanto los que aún están en sus países de origen como los que ahorita están llegando aquí a Canadá.
Hello, my name is Noé. I'm from Hidalgo, Mexico. I was an agricultural worker for 6 years, but like Carlos, I'm now in another temporary foreign worker program. This year, agricultural workers are going through something much more complicated than other years due to the health contingency caused by COVID-19. But those who are still in their countries of origin and those who have already arrived in Canada.
Bueno, los primeros aún están con la incertidumbre de cuándo podrán salir, cuál será el cuidado que deban tomar, el momento de iniciar, el momento de tomar el viaje hacia aquí a Canadá. Muchas oficinas en la Secretaría del Trabajo en México aún están cerradas, aún permanecen detenidos la mayor parte de los trámites que tienen que ver con la emisión de las visas y la programación de los vuelos para afuera, ¿no? Para venir aquí a Canadá igual. Además, hay muy poca información por teléfono. Por otra parte, los agricultores ya están acá también. Están bajo tensión, ya hay registro de varios contagios en algunas granjas aquí en Columbia Británica. Mientras que los están llegando, pues tienen que tomar cuarentena igual por 2 semanas obligatorias. Y pues les van a pagar 30 horas a la semana. Eso es lo que ha acordado el gobierno local. Pero esto no les garantiza que tengan suficiente en cuanto a comida, un buen servicio de salud, a pesar de que la embajada ya hizo un compromiso al respecto.
The former face uncertainty about when they will be able to come to Canada and what kind of care they need once they're here. Many of the Secretary of Labor offices in Mexico are still closed, and most of the procedures to issue the work visas and scheduling flights to Canada have been held, plus the very little information available over the phone. On the other hand, the farm workers who are already here are also under a lot of pressure because there have been outbreaks in several farms in British Columbia. Those who are arriving have to be in quarantine for 2 weeks with a payment of about 30 hours every week. But there's no guarantee that they have enough food or good health services, despite the promises of the embassy and the federal government in these regards.
Aquí en Columbia Británica en particular, el gobierno provincial está pagando por el hotel y por la comida de los trabajadores durante 15 días, mientras que el gobierno federal les está ofreciendo a los empleadores $1,500 por cada trabajador para que garantice las óptimas condiciones de aislamiento en la casa y la distancia física en el trabajo. Por ahora creo que es notorio que los trabajadores agrícolas son indispensables o esenciales, como le están diciendo ahora, para la economía canadiense, claro. Pero las deficiencias en el contrato no han sido mejoradas, creo. Y como consecuencia, muchos empleadores abusan de eso, pues los hacen trabajar largas jornadas, con un sueldo mínimo y a veces incompleto, así como viviendas en muy malas condiciones y con servicios limitados, desafortunadamente.
In BC, In BC in particular, the provincial government is paying for the hotel and food for some farm workers during the first 2 weeks, while the federal government is offering employers $1,500 for each worker to improve both self-isolation conditions at home and physical distance at work. For now, I think that farm workers are very important, or essentials as they are called now, for the Canadian economy. But the deficiencies of the job contract have never been improved, and as a consequence, many employers abuse it, giving the workers long hours of work and with a minimum wage, and sometimes incomplete payments as well, and housing the workers in poor condition and with limited services. And just to finish, Alejo?
Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, just to finish, we want to say that it's more difficult to organize now under these circumstances that Carlos and Noé have talked about, especially because Fuerza Migrante's work is most of the time live, face-to-face with the workers, and now we cannot go to the farms as much as we would like. One of the problems that is now exacerbating more is that employers prohibit more now than ever what the workers can or cannot do. Like for instance, they're not allowed to speak to strangers in the street or the stores. And now under the excuse that is to protect the workers' health. In remote cases, we have used WhatsApp or other social media to keep contact with the workers, or with workers that call us from Quebec, Ontario, or Alberta, or with widows who call us from Mexico asking us for help to apply for their pension when they lose their partner. But now almost all of our work is just like this, basically through WhatsApp. In these conditions, institutions like Canada Service, COAN, Canada Revenue Agency, still think less about the workers and adapt even less to their needs, to the workers' needs. We have to fight a little more with the same Canadian bureaucrats as always, now facing a sea of new regulations and measures that are changing several times a week without even announcing it. To share about updated and corroborated information, but mainly to contribute to the analysis of how all this affects migrant workers, we have produced some materials, like easy to share informative materials, and we have tried to share them with the workers as much as possible, those with that are here in Canada, but also that are still in their home countries. Even so, we believe that is the solution. That the solution is not established in educating, but that we have to attack all fronts at the same time, as there's so much missing information, as Noé, or lack of information, as Noé mentioned. We believe the best vehicle to organize this with the workers is to develop a new contract, a new employment contract made by the workers themselves, that not only says what is going on and what is not, but also serves as a tool to develop their critical understanding of the situation they are in and how that relates to the oppression of others. By having a real concrete tool that is born out of and reflects the knowledge and needs of the workers themselves, our vision is right now that they can promote, defend, and serve as a point of unity to push across Canada. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Migrant farm workers and Fuerza Migrante are doing what we think is right, and others should do their part and work with farm workers too. We support them and we are in solidarity, and we hope that when we hit the bosses and the state, they will not leave us alone. When you strike, count on us. And to finish, we want to say that crises are the clearest manifestations of the logic of social systems. They are the moments when its internal contradictions are out in the open, visible to everyone and anyone who wants to see. During this crisis, the colors of the Canadian state have once again been painted across the wall. Like financial support for employers of instead of migrant workers, rent supplements for landlords and not the tenants, bailouts for big oil, gas, and bankers, and crumbs for to everyone else. Canada's response has left no doubts about this logic: support capital and continue dispossession while shifting the burden of the crisis to working class and Indigenous people. The state has shown where its interests lie, and this is why we believe it is simply not the time to lobby governments for a more generous share of the pie. Instead, we're building our own pie, engaging our political imagination and seeking to redesign how systems of migration should look like. We believe this attempt at creating autonomous collective power from below is in essence the same as those seeking rent strikes, squatting buildings, blockading further colonial extractions, and organizing work stoppages. We will be doing a disservice to our movement if we limited our struggle to the escape valves provided by the system. These are outdated and incapable of producing the liberation that we all need as working class. Power lies with Indigenous land defender organizations, underhouse and homeless organizations, queer and trans organizations, as well as racialized working class associations. We need to build it with them, and it's the only way to ensure our past is present and our future lives today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have a couple children on the live feed saying hi, Dad, to one of the workers. So just thought I'd pass that on. Also, if you could please post your questions on the live feed. We're just going to show a short video now from the migrant justice workers, a message from migrant workers across Canada on May Day. I think the video should come on now. Tamara?
In a public health crisis, unless we protect everyone, we cannot protect anyone.
I got my wife, that is, her due date is on May 29th. Me and my wife, we don't have an SIN, a valid SIN number. And still we are asked to stay home. But the reality is that I cannot stay home. I don't have any kind of support. I need to hustle basically every day.
Ahora con el problema del COVID-19 no he podido ir a trabajar a Canadá. Y como nuestros ingresos económicos es con el trabajo que realizamos en Canadá, me encuentro en apuros económicos para solventar gastos en mi familia.
We cannot imagine ourselves on the street with our kids, having no way to provide them any food.
Los indocumentados, nosotros también somos humanos, nosotros también trabajamos y contribuimos fuertemente a la economía, a nuestro trabajo, nuestra mano de obra, que permite que siga funcionando esta máquina de la economía. Nosotras limpiamos, cuidamos las casas de otras mujeres, las que trabajamos como domésticas, cuidamos niños, ancianos, hacemos limpieza en hospitales, supermercados, trabajamos en los campos, en las fábricas. Nuestra mano de obra se encuentra en todos los sectores de la economía.
Myself and all my coworkers were all laid off. As a result of losing my job and also not qualifying for support because my SIN is expired, I have no idea how I'm going to be able to pay for rent and food.
I still need to eat and live. I believe we also should not be left behind. We contributed to Canada.
我希望得到公平的待遇，我也应该得到政府的紧急救济金。
all migrants in Canada must have income support.
It's really hard for me to believe that migrants like myself and all migrants cannot get support because of a formality like expired social insurance number.
I'm ready to work. I'm ready to do what it takes to be a resident here. That I also include fighting for my rights as a worker, regardless of my status.
It is absolutely urgent that the government immediately extend income support to all workers who have been affected by COVID-19, regardless of their migration status.
Okay. We have one question so far about how people can support Fuerza Migrante.
Sorry, are you?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Now, or, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I speak for myself in the sense of we do believe that each one of us has a role to play. All of us come together in the org with our own unique capacities, our own unique abilities, in different territories, in different countries at some point. We got folks organizing in Mexico. We got folks organizing in Quebec and Ontario. We got folks organizing here. So I think the easiest way is to come in contact with us. We definitely need more folks. Actually, I mean, it depends on, I guess we need folks. We need folks also to be interested in this issue, but also to be willing to educate others, but also be willing to put hands on the ground. As Alexa was saying, education at times is not sufficient. I'm sure we can all list time and time over again where rights which we know we have are not being respected, not because we don't know our rights or not because the institutions don't know our rights, but simply because of systemic systems of oppression that move beyond the realm of right, that impose power. So if you or anyone want to see how you can contribute, let's talk. Come send us an email, send us a text, and we can see how we work together. We're very open. We don't really have exact things that we can plug people in. That's what makes us an organic living organization, and how we can grow with the capacities of each of our organizers. And so I know that was a vague answer, but come talk to us, and then we'll see how we can get together.
Great. Where can they find you?
Great question. So we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter, and we do have a website, fuerzamigrante.ca, which you can contact anytime. And if not, the phone numbers are on there, the email is on there. You can simply get at us through those avenues.
I have a question here for Sarah Dowd. Do you think the organizing in the hospital will continue past COVID? If you want to expand on that a bit.
The organizing always continues. It was going on before COVID, like I said, it'll be going on after. Even before COVID hit, we were organizing around other occupational health and safety issues, mostly like the assault of staff members and the support that's available to staff when they're assaulted at work. So the organizing will definitely continue. And like I said, I think for those of us on the left that are engaged in this fight as healthcare workers, the question is, how do we transition this momentum around organizing around COVID to organizing for broader demands that are going to benefit the whole working class, like a more just and equitable healthcare system. And it's going to take a lot of organizing. So.
Do you feel like the political consciousness of sort of society in the US is turning around on these issues? Do you have hope that sort of the broader society will get behind the nurses in demanding public hospitals?
I'm optimistic. I mean, I think we've seen a huge shift just in the last 5 years. You know, we've had some prominent people run for office that are pushing Medicare for all, that have had a huge amount of momentum behind them. And so that's kind of at least raised the discussion of inequality in healthcare and healthcare as a human right. That's okay. I'm sorry, I just totally got distracted for a second. But I am optimistic about the trajectory of the United States, for as awful as our history has been. Maybe not the next 4 years. I think we're looking at maybe Trump getting reelected. But I think there has been sort of a mass awakening, and people really understanding that society is run by the rich. We're all just here to have a profit extracted from our work. That's the only reason that society runs, and people are fed up with it. Of course, I'm in New York, so there's kind of a different perspective here as well. But even across the country, people are calling themselves socialists and railing against corporate greed. And so to me, these are encouraging signs.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Sarah, I think you kind of addressed this in your answer already, but how, for anyone, if you could talk more about the connection between struggles. And also I have another question asking for how people in rural communities can show solidarity with farm workers.
If I can answer the second one.
Great.
We know that employers are members of faith groups, sometimes have siblings or family members in government positions, like in part of the local government or city halls. So I believe that what we need to, or people should do, is to call them out when they know what is happening in the farms, not to be complicit. Get in contact with the workers, show them your appreciation, but also act in solidarity when there's injustice happening on a farm. Sometimes the workers take some time to tell you what is actually happening on the farms, especially if they don't know you. But if you get to know them and build a relationship with them, they will tell you more of what is happening behind doors, and you will actually know the reality of these workers, and not just base your conceptions about a farm based on the employer or the nice faces that are in the posters that are in Save On Foods, Safeway, or on any other of these supermarkets. So yeah, so get together and just speak up when you hear workers complaining about their working conditions, and show them that you really care for them, and demand your local authorities to change the working conditions of these workers, for sure. I don't know if Alejandro, Carlos, or Noé want to say anything. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on these questions? I have another question. One, people who used to be middle class. Many people have been laid off and they now see themselves more as precarious. Wondering thoughts from the speakers on how we can mobilize these people to join us in the fight in the future. And I have another question, again, specifically around farm workers. If there's any good models that have been won across Canada for good working conditions for farm workers, and a question about how migrant farm workers are placed on farms. Like, I think the person asking the question means, like, do they get to choose, or how does that work?
Sarah, can you repeat the last part of the question?
Yeah, so the question is, are there any good models in Canada of where workers have been able to achieve good conditions on farms? And also, if you could talk about how the migrant workers are placed on farms. So is it the employer's choice or the worker's choice?
Yeah, so what we've been learning is that the programs themselves, the temporary foreign worker program, the seasonal agricultural worker program, are exploitative by design. So these programs create or give all the opportunity for employers to do pretty much whatever they want with the workers on the farms. And there are regulations, but there are very few ways to really enforce the few regulations that exist. That's one thing. The other thing is that, yeah, there can be a very nice employers, who are also very nice members of these local communities and blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, what you will realize when an employer is a good employer, when there's an injured worker, or when there's a worker getting sick for any reason, or for a war-related incident. Those are the moments when you realize how good or bad an employer can be. The only good experience that we've seen are in Washington, not in Canada, and they are called Familias Unidas por la Justicia, and is pretty much a community grassroots organization that is also whose members are also farm workers, and they have been able to kind of create their own communities, and with some also regulations for their own working conditions. So I think that in Canada, where the workers don't have any possibility to provide their voice and their ideas on how to improve the programs, or how to change, or how they want to work, because the workers don't have any voice, I think that we're gonna keep having these programs that are not giving any possibility for the workers to build power, to decide their own conditions, and their own based on their needs and the knowledge too. So these are very hierarchical, structured programs that are not really considering at all the workers' needs and yeah, and sociocultural backgrounds.
Thank you.
Quiero explicar más o menos cómo es el proceso de muchos trabajadores que tardan mucho tiempo en poder ingresar al programa.
¿Quieres explicar? Noé?
Yeah, so I can translate. So so for us, he wants to explain basically how is the process by which workers are assigned. Workers have to wait a long time usually to end up at a farm in Canada.
Sí, yo creo que Sí, bueno, lo que pasa es que tiene la gran cantidad de trabajadores, por ejemplo, de México, de mi país, para poder entrar en el programa. No todos, bueno, mayormente les toma mucho tiempo y muchos documentos por tramitar al programa que organiza eso, la embajada mexicana aquí en Canadá, tanto la embajada canadiense en México, les toma un promedio de un año reclutar todos los documentos para presentar tanto documentos legales, documentos de identidad y documentos de salud que garanticen que tienen una buena salud, una buena condición física y que tengan todos los documentos como pasaporte y todo de viaje. Les toma más o menos un año para poder ingresar al país.
So the great quantity of workers from Mexico, the great quantity, most of them, well, not all of them can, a large majority of them cannot come through. In general, this process takes, or to come to a farm takes around a year in the beginning. So you need various documents and processes to enter into the program. And these have to be presented, which are the documents which are required by both the Canadian state and the Mexican state, which are the ones who organize this program, at least as it pertains to him, to Noe. These are documents of identity, of health. So they have to be in quote unquote optimal health condition. And that has to be corroborated by a doctor. And there needs to be their passports in rule as well.
Y también, por ejemplo, en mi experiencia personal, yo tardé casi 8 años en ingresar al programa, que es el programa de trabajadores temporales agrícolas en el acuerdo México-Canadá. Y pues nada, cada año tenía que estar actualizando los documentos, esperando. Después lo ponen a uno en una lista de espera y se toma un tiempo. A mí me tomó casi 8 años más o menos. Y ya que uno está en el programa, toda esa actualización de documentos es cada año que se le vuelve uno a México, hay que entregar una cierta cantidad de reportes sobre lo que uno trabajó, el dinero que uno ganó, algún reporte si tuvo de hecho, si uno le gustó el trabajo, no le gustó, en qué trabajó. Pero también después de hacer ese reporte con México, con la Secretaría de México de Trabajo, también hay que volver a actualizar los documentos de identidad como el pasaporte, hay que tenerlo siempre actualizado, pagar cada año la visa de trabajo y esperar a que lo asignen o que la propia granja donde ya trabajó en la anterior temporada lo vuelva a solicitar uno. En el caso que no sea así, pues seguir esperando. Y es algo que uno como trabajador todos los años tiene que estar 100% con la documentación completa. No puede uno tener, digamos que algún retraso en algún documento o en algún pago, incluso como la visa, como por ejemplo, los estudios de salud que uno tiene que pagarse a tiempo y hacerse en la fecha. Pero también es tristemente que cuando uno trabaja ya estando aquí en Canadá, no todas las granjas son buenas. En mi experiencia, no han sido todas buenas. Vale.
Okay, so in my personal experience, no way. It took 8 years to enter the SWAP, which is Seasonal Agricultural Worker Program. Every year, he had to actualize the documents, and once you actualize them, they put you on a waiting list. And his waiting period lasted a whole eight years in his case. Now, once a person is in the program, every year, so you were assigned to a farm, and it is required when you come back within a very short time, I believe it's like 5 days or so, that everyone must report how much they worked, how much they were paid, how much they sent home, how they spent that, if they like it, if there was any problems. And after that, they must continue to do the process again. So they must pay for their visa every year. They must do their health reports every year. and get those actualized or updated, sorry. And they have to wait for the farm that they worked for to ask for them again. If the farm does not ask for them, they're put in a waiting list again. So every year there is that process over and over again with the documents and payment. So any problem with your documents, any problem with the payment or with the health condition, you're put on the waiting list or you're taken out of the program. And unfortunately, when one comes here and one works, many of the farms are not good. In my experience, they were not good.
Thank you for that. We have a couple questions for Deena. So wondering if you can address the question from before, which is now there's some people in the middle class dropping to the precarious class and maybe seeing things in a way they haven't before. How can we engage those people? And also, how do you see us building the kind of solidarity you were talking about between union and non-union workers?
So, I mean, I think that this has always been a huge issue for, I think for many of us. I think in the 2008 recession, the union, the formal union sector lost a lot of workers. And I know sort of when I was a union organizer back in the early 1990s with free trade, in the garment industry, we lost masses of members at that point. And so back then, I felt that what we were trying to do, and I think that this is sort of lessons for unions right now, is that as people lose their membership, how do you still retain membership in the union? Like, you know, this is, we have such traditional models of membership and what it means to become part of a union and what it means to become part of the labor movement. And one of the things that we've been trying to do at the Workers' Action Center has been to say, you know, just because you're unemployed doesn't mean that you don't believe in decent work or that you don't believe that people should have the ability to have good health and safety working conditions, or just because you are not physically able to work. Maybe you have, maybe you're at home because you're having to take care of kids right now, or maybe you actually can't work and so you need to be on social assistance. You can still be part of the labor movement, right? I mean, so at the Workers' Action Center, our membership has many people who are not working, who are on social assistance, who are working, are underemployed, have too much work, are in many different sectors. And so part of my answer is how you build solidarity is and how do you build connections to all of those workers who have lost their jobs, is that we need to open up our mind around and our organizations and those who have money and those who have structures to sort of open them up so that you can have an association of people who used to be members. You know, like when I was at the garment industry and in the garment union, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, we had an association for laid off garment workers. These were mainly women sewing machine operators who had lost their job because of free trade and because of NAFTA. And so what we did was we had a whole outreach project that, depending on the language that women spoke, we reached out to sort of find out what had happened to them since they'd lost their work. And many workers become incredibly isolated and become find it very difficult. Like if you can't find work in the first sort of 6 months, like the trajectory is not good, right? And we saw this in the 2008 recession that hit a lot of industries where, again, you know, if you didn't find work in the first 6 months, you sort of moved into temp agency work, you moved into very precarious types of work. So we know what happens, right? And so this is a moment for unions who are losing their members to say, you know what, just because you don't have a job anymore doesn't mean you lose connection to our union, right? And then it means for community organizations, I mean, one of the problems of having such massive state funding of community organizations is that they have become very conservatized through that process. And so many of them do not provide services to people who without documents, and it becomes very restricted. However, in this moment during the pandemic, things have been allowed to open up. Community organizations that have had very strict guidelines around what you're supposed to do, your programming, you've got to do this, and you know, provide statistics. All of a sudden, the government knows that they can't deliver the programs in the way that they should have, and so they've sort of hands off and said, you've got to do what you have to do to respond to the community's needs. And guess what? Community organizations have those connections and are able to do that and have responded, you know, mainly around mutual aid, but it shows that that kind of restrictive nature of state funding has had a huge impact in terms of building solidarity and building connections. So I guess my sort of long rambling answer to those questions is sort of like, you know, we have to reimagine what it means for membership. We have to reimagine what it means for action. And so as Sarah Dowd said, like, you know, at the beginning, you know, actions where you're sort of tangibly, you know, out there. If you're a nurse and you're out there supporting the Amazon workers, right? If you're, you know, a frontline sort of grocery store worker, but you're supporting personal support workers in long-term care, like we need to sort of now take those essential jobs and have them supporting farm workers, right? So that we are seeing those points of connection where, you know, the chain throughout the food processing, whether it's starting to, you know, grow the food, to picking the food, to processing the food, to then delivering the food, that whole chain. How do we build solidarity amongst that chain? How do we build connections between restaurant workers and farm workers? How do we build connections between, you know, people in our communities who are seniors and personal support workers, and have them standing up for those conditions? So I think we really have to kind of, I think, open up our imagination and open up our ways in which, you know, and break those structures and those silos that have been imposed on us. And I think that all of that kind of went out the window with COVID-19. I think that we've all kind of been stripped back to the basics. How do we take that and then transform our organizing and points of connection with each other? I think that is the critical moment right now. And I think, you know, everyone keeps saying, well, we don't want to go back to the new, you know, to what the normal was back then, because that wasn't there to serve anyone. But so then it's up to us to reframe what that new normal is, and to provide that leadership at this moment. And I think that's going to be a critical way in which we support workers who are really struggling right now and being forced to work, and are very scared right now of the kinds of conditions that they're experiencing. We're getting calls on a daily basis by workers who are like, I don't want to go to work. I don't have anyone here in this country to take care of me if I'm sick. Who's going to take care of me if I get COVID-19? Nobody. I'm by myself. My family is back home in Bangladesh or in Mexico or wherever. And so people are struggling every day trying to figure out how to pay their bills. And so at this moment, those of us who are in these positions where we can support those vital connections, we need to step up and we need to think through how we can do that right now. So for instance, teachers who are at home right now, you know, trying to teach kids, you know, all power to you, through home and through the computers. But what else could teachers be doing right now, for instance, to support, say, the farm workers who are being quarantined and who don't even have access to food, basic food, while they're quarantined on farms? What are sort of those points of connection that could be made at this moment? Like it's sort of starting to think like that, I think. and trying to do that. So those of us who are in those positions, I think we have a real leadership moment at this point to build that solidarity right now.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to invite the rest of the speakers to, if there's anything else you want to say about May Day or a message that you would like to send to other frontline essential workers at this time, and then we'll close off. Who wants to go first? Sarah, are you ready to go?
I'm not ready, but I'll go.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was a fantastic panel. I really loved hearing from everybody. You know, we don't hear a lot from farm workers, you know, in New York City, and it's just crazy. Some of the things I've heard are really true. I guess just like one last little thought was like we had teachers out outside of the hospital with us when we were out there at Harlem Hospital. The movement of rank and file educators of the UFT were out there showing solidarity, and it was an amazing feeling. I think that's the kind of solidarity we need to show with each other. My mantra for the last 4 weeks has been don't mourn, organize.
Great. I think Carlos has something to say.
Bueno, hemos tenido ejemplos de trabajadores agrícolas últimamente, la dificultad que tienen para ingresar a este país. Claro, el sistema del virus está causando una problemática enorme, pero además de eso, no solo contribuye el virus, sino se agregan otras situaciones de las que más que todo se están aprovechando de ellos.
So Carlos says that Carlos says that there have been some temporary foreign workers coming, and now there's not only the problems that they usually have, but now there are other problems that are making easy to take advantage of them.
Bueno, soy de Guatemala, ¿verdad? Tengo conocimiento del programa de trabajadores de Guatemala.
I'm from Guatemala, and I have, sorry, and I know very well how the program works.
Generalmente no vamos a hablar de más que todo de la situación que se vive ahora por el COVID-19. Lastimosamente es una situación muy difícil, ¿verdad? Los guatemaltecos no han podido ingresar muchos. El gobierno está siendo muy estricto.
Okay, so Guatemala, the workers that come from Guatemala have had less possibilities to come because there's some restrictions made by the government. So there are few workers with that have been able to come in the midst of the COVID-19.
Sé de algunos que están en cuarentena. Sé que
no se la están pasando bien.
I know about some workers that are now in the self-isolation period and they're having a lot of difficulties right now.
También sé de muchas personas que están esperando venir. Tienen el permiso de trabajo extendido para poder ingresar a Canadá, pero va a ser muy difícil la situación. Va a ser muy difícil que ingresen. Esto va paso por paso.
So there are a lot of workers that are ready with their work permits. They're ready to come, but it's going to be very difficult for them to come to work. So it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to be it needs to take step by step in order for them to come.
Nos damos cuenta que el programa de trabajadores mexicanos y el programa de trabajadores guatemaltecos tiene un poco de diferencia. Entonces, eso dificulta y hay más temor para los guatemaltecos. ¿Por qué? Porque algunos de ellos pagan más dinero de lo normal para poder ingresar.
So both programs, the seasonal agricultural workers program that it has that gives the opportunity to Mexican workers to come to work, is different than the temporary foreign worker program for low wage occupations, which is the one that the Guatemalans used to come to work. And one of the big differences that these two programs have is that the Guatemalan workers have to pay a high fee for the recruitment.
Ellos generalmente para ingresar, bueno, y me incluyo, que yo lo viví, tenemos un gasto más grande, una deuda un poco difícil, y nos da miedo, y ahora es el caso de ellos, tienen miedo a perder ese dinero que ya está invertido para ingresar a este país.
So because they have to pay high fees for the recruitment process, and because they're having this, we see all these difficulties for them to come right now with the pandemic. Now their fear is bigger because they're afraid of losing basically their money if they're not able to come to work in Canada this year.
No es nada fácil saber que se pueda perder ese dinero. Hay una esperanza en la que están basados ellos. Ellos para pagar ese dinero tienen que ingresar a este país. Es la única forma. No quieren perder su dinero.
So yeah, so because it's the only way for Guatemalan workers to come to work in Canada is paying these high fees. They're struggling right now with the fear of losing not only the possibility to come to work, but also to the possibility to lose the money that they already invested. And I know Carlos didn't say, but I know that some of them have got into debts to be able to pay these high fees for the recruitment. Y para terminar.
Gracias por la oportunidad. No tenemos el espacio suficiente para explicar cómo es el programa de trabajadores guatemaltecos, y es difícil para un guatemalteco ingresar acá. Es más fácil para un mexicano, pero en el tiempo de crisis todos están bloqueados. Gracias.
So thank you very much for the opportunity. There's not enough time to talk about the programs or what is happening to the workers from Guatemala.
Me pasó la última.
Oh yeah, so there, yeah. So although there's some differences between the two programs, both Mexican workers and Guatemalan workers are going through all these difficult times together. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else, last message to fellow workers or any final thoughts you wanted to share? All right. Well, thank you so much again for spending your May Day evening with us. Thank you so much to all the speakers. You know, I think, Deena, the way you started it out with the Arundhati Roy quote of the X-ray of the system, I think probably most people on this call see the world that way anyway, and now there's more people joining us and really seeing capitalism for what it is. And that's led to what many of you touched on, it sort of a renewed maybe willingness for more people to take action than we've seen before. So just want to end on that. And, you know, we have a lot of work ahead of us in terms of the struggles, the real struggles that everybody's facing at this hard, difficult time. But hopefully with this sort of more people seeing the world for what it is, there will be opportunities to work together in solidarity to build something different. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all for spending your evening with us, and special thank you also for the translation. That's not easy to do, so really appreciated all of you from Fuerza Migrante joining on and translating for us. That was excellent. So have a good night, everyone. Take care.
Ciao.
Ciao. Have a good night. Thank you so much for everything.
Okay.